Good afternoon. Welcome to the Dollars and Cents of Becoming an Appraiser Supervisor. As you may already know, this is a support webinar for current and future appraiser supervisors brought to you by the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board, TALCB, or just the board for short, and our guest panelists. I'm Sierra Pizarro. I'm the communication specialist for the board. We want to thank you all for attending. A reminder, this is being recorded, so if you have to step away, this recording will be sent to you once it's done. I think we have a good mix of appraisers and those aspiring to be in attendance. We're going to try to be as brief as possible with our Q&A. That way we can have extra time for questions at the end. But if you did submit a question beforehand upon registration, we got that in. It's sprinkled throughout our agenda. We condensed and refined a few just for clarity and timing, but we will get to those. Keep an eye on the webinar chat box. We're going to post links in there to various resources as we get them. And let's dig into it. Each panelist was curated to represent a role within the trainee experience, and together we hope to encourage more appraisers to become supervisors and give insight as well to those aspiring appraisers. I'm going to start introducing our panelists now. We have our TALCB Director, Melissa Tran. If you didn't know, the board is responsible for the licensing and enforcement of appraisers. Also soon to be coming in, one of our board members, Mark McAnally. He is a board member. If you didn't know, they are in charge of making rules and regulations for Texas appraisers. He's also going to provide our supervisor perspective. Two other panelists will be providing that perspective too. We have Olivo Castillo Jr. He is a certified residential appraiser, ATA board member. That's the Association of Texas Appraisers. Also an ATA board member, Stephanie Streep Tooley. On our panelists, again, a certified residential appraiser. She's also a member of the National Association of Appraisers. Representing Fannie Mae on our panel, we have Denise Jernigan. She is the director, hello to you, of the Appraiser Diversity Initiative. Their mission is to support diversity in the profession. And we have Kevin Smith, a manager with Fannie Mae. Last but not least, we have Nicole Morris. She is a new appraiser trainee. She's also an ADI scholar. We'll tell you more about that in just a moment. But first, we kind of want to lay down the basics, give you a supervisor trainee 101. Giving that for us is going to be Melissa Tran. Director Tran, if you don't mind, could you please explain why this supervisor trainee relationship exists?
Yeah, for sure. I can't say it enough, but supervisors play such a crucial role in the development of an inspiring appraiser. Having a supervisor is like literally the only way a trainee can get experience hours in the traditional experience model. Every single appraiser tuned into this webinar knows how important it is, how a good supervisor can set you up for a successful appraisal career, just in the same way as a bad one could set you up for a bad career. Not only do they provide the trainees with the hours that they need, but they wear a lot of hats. So as the supervisor, you act as somebody's teacher. And so you give them the practical training to say, this is how you measure the house. This is how you pull these comps. You act as their mentor. You're taking somebody under your wing and saying, like, let me show you how I do what I do. Let me show you my day to day. And you provide them with guidance, giving them that advice, whether it be related to a difficult appraisal assignment or answering a business practice question. There's no college degree for this. You don't go to school and graduate and become an appraiser. And so it's truly up to the appraisers out there right now who are willing to supervise to build the future of this profession.
Perfect. How to become a trainee was one question we wanted to dig into, if you don't mind.
Yeah, that's an easy one. You take 79 hours of qualifying education, and then you find a supervisory appraiser. You submit an application, and we'll do a background check and take a look at your education. But the big piece of that is finding the supervisor.
Can you also talk about the ways the board, TALCB, has made the process easier on both roles?
One of the big things that we invested in the past year is building what we call the TALCB notebook. We're the only state in the country that has something like this, but essentially what it is, it's an interactive way for trainees and supervisors to track and approve hours. And so you go online, you create an account, and every time you, as a trainee, you gain some experience hours, your supervisor will be able to go in on the backside of that, all online, digital, and approve it. It tracks your hours for you, so you're not sitting there counting. Um, it'll give you real-time updates on how many hours you have and how many you have left to go. Beyond that, our board has worked really hard to make sure that Texas has no barriers to entry above the federal minimum. And so Texas is one of a handful of states that can proudly say that we don't require anything more than what the federal requirements are. We are also one of very few states that allow supervisors to have up to 5 trainees. So the federal limitation is 3 unless the state allows for it. And so in Texas, you can have, as a supervisor, you can have up to 5 trainees, which is really unique.
We have an aspiring appraiser from Beeville, Texas, who asks, how long do I have to complete the 1,000 hours of appraisal trainee logged hours?
That's a really good question, and one that we get often, but the key takeaway is experience doesn't expire. And so when you think about gaining experience, what the federal requirements is, you have to have a minimum amount of time. And so it sounds like he is going for a licensed residential credential. So that means that he has to get 1,000 hours over a minimum of 6 months.
Thank you. The next question, and another aspiring appraiser, this one from San Antonio, who says they are a non-college degreed individual and future advancement to certified residential appraiser status. The question is, what is being heard or discussed above and beyond the current options today, if anything? And this kind of lumps into another question we got from another aspiring appraiser from Frisco. Are there any upcoming changes to the field? What changes, if any, would you like to see completed specific to process improvement?
There are so many conversations right now happening about the requirements and what it takes to become an appraiser. I think we've heard time and time again from a lot of people about how hard it is to become an appraiser. So requirements are set at the federal level. The appraisal foundation, or the people who are responsible for setting what the criteria is to become an appraiser, they are beginning to take a really hard look at the requirements. And so they've implemented this 3-phase review plan. Right now in phase 1, the discussion circles around the college degree requirement. And so what is the importance and worth of the college requirement as it relates to becoming an appraiser? In the second phase, they're going to explore experience. And then finally, in the third phase of this, they're going to explore the national examination requirements, the structure and the requirements of that exam. So I think the best part about all of this is they're looking for stakeholder feedback. So I encourage every single person on this call to go to the foundation's website to read the concept paper that has been published about the college degree requirements. Listen along the way and submit your comments. And that's the right now, I think that is the biggest review of the criteria is happening at the federal foundation level.
Many of you are well aware of this next topic, but if you don't mind explaining the current difficulty trainees have in finding supervisors.
I think the biggest barrier to finding the supervisors. So what we know about this for the people who have been in the profession for a long time is like supervisors typically come from who we know, so friends and family, right? So if you're lucky enough to know somebody who is an appraiser, you'll have an easier time. And I think a big part of this is misconceptions on what it means to be a supervisor and the perceived risk versus award analysis that appraisers do in deciding whether or not they want to become a supervisor. I am really hoping that today, hearing from this amazing panel that we have, we can debunk and demystify a lot of what supervision means, and like maybe show it could actually be a really good business move to become a supervisor.
I just want to throw this out there. We have many attendees are Texans. There are some from outside of the state, so thanks for showing interest. There's one appraiser from Troy, Ohio, who wants to know how many appraisers exist now compared to 2020.
In 2020, we had about 5,200 licensed and certified appraisers. And as of August, the end of August, we have about 5,900 appraisers in the state of Texas.
Thank you, Director Tran. We're going to move on to our appraisers who are providing the supervisor perspective part of this webinar. That's Stephanie and Olivo. The first question for you two, whoever wants to go first, were you nervous to take on a trainee, your first trainee or anyone thereafter?
Stephanie, you can start if you like.
Sure. Was I nervous? Honestly, I don't think I was, but I also think that I went into it very optimistic because my dad was my supervisor and things went really well. And so he's like, look, this is kind of what we do. If somebody hadn't done it for you, somebody hadn't done it for me, then we wouldn't be here. So it's only fair to kind of pass that along. And he's kind of like, honestly, I'll take over a lot of it since I've done it before and kind of show you the ropes. So I didn't feel like I was doing it alone. And that really helped in his encouragement to do it. And then our first trainee went really, really well. So it was kind of like after we did a few things and got used to it and got knowing what to do, it wasn't as scary anymore. And it's really not as nerve-wracking as long as you keep the open communication between you and your trainee.
Perfect. Maybe Olivo, if you want to grab the next question, an appraiser from Corsicana, Texas, wants to know what risks, if any, do you see with taking on a trainee and how do you mitigate those risks?
So there's always risk with taking on employees, right? And when you take on trainees, you're taking on employees. There's obviously the risk of liability. You're responsible for the work that the trainee performs, right? What I've done to be able to mitigate that risk is to be very clear about my company culture, right? And that allows me to choose the right people to join our organization. And then obviously adequate training is extremely important. So build a plan, build a system to where you can develop your trainees in a way that, you know, they flourish and become good appraisers.
Stephanie, if you could answer this next one, what are the benefits you've experienced with being a supervisor?
Sure. Actually, the biggest benefit by far, 100%, is I learned a heck of a lot more being a supervisor than I did doing it on my own. They ask so many good questions, and especially if you haven't had a trainee in a while and you've been doing it for a while, you get stuck in your ways. And then somebody comes along and is like, but why? But how do we do that? It's like constantly asking for your advice and to explain it. And I don't know about you guys, the best way to learn is usually through teaching. And so if you can teach somebody your logic, then you have a really good work file. And then you have somebody else to bounce ideas off of. You have somebody else looking over your reports. You have them working on reports, and then you look over their reports. And so our revision request went down and our quality went up. And then on top of it, because they were bringing up stuff maybe I hadn't talked about or learned about or done in the field in however many years, it was great refreshers for me as well. And so it really does keep you fresh in your profession and make sure that you are doing what you need to do and you have a reason behind what you're doing and you're not just doing it because you've always done it that way.
Thank you. I want to welcome one of our board members, Mark McAnally. Maybe you can tackle this next question for us. We have an appraiser from Hallsville, Texas, who asks, how can it be cost effective? I need a wage, and when I spend my time training my competition, why would I, especially when fees are only going down?
Well, there is no doubt that as some of the other panelists have mentioned, the beginning of taking a trainee on is it's time intensive, but again, if you have the right culture, as was mentioned with Livio, and you've got the right people in place, as they become more experienced and they learn more, you find that they start contributing more than they are taking more, and then it turns into a win-win situation. That's how we have approached it.
So what do you supervisors, the three of you, what do you look for in a trainee?
The number one thing I look for is their work ethic. I used to look for experience in the field and whatnot. Honestly, I don't care. I can teach that. I can't teach your work ethic. If you want it and you want to go for it and you have the ability and motivation to learn and grow, then that's all I really need. I just need your dedication and your willingness to learn. Anything else is great and a plus, but that is the main thing that I personally look for these days. It was not what I originally looked for, and it's something that I've learned to look for.
Thank you.
I'll follow up on that real quick. The same thing, somebody that's coachable, somebody that is willing to do the work that's necessary from a personal perspective, from a personal level, because there's a lot of growth that a trainee has to do on their own, right? Read the books, take the classes, all that stuff. That's outside of working hours. Somebody that's willing to do that and that's looking at a long-term plan, because this is a process, right? And so somebody that's capable of doing that and also has the financial capability to take it on from a long-term perspective.
And I might add too that also from my vantage point, the first group of trainees that I ever brought on board were straight out of college. So there are some technical things that you can look at from someone that's coming out of that environment. That they have there's an interest if they have taken real estate courses, economics, finance, some of the more technical classes like that. But I usually do it in two phases. The first phase is a time that I call, and of course I work for an state agency, so we're structured in the hiring process. But the first time I meet with them, it may be at Starbucks, and we sit down and have I know you get to know me. What are your interests? How did you get here? Where did you learn about the profession? Things like that. Then if we get into an interview environment, which then there are other applicants as well, the main factor, and I know this one seems to be a little bit intangible, but it has worked for me, is I find the ones that are driven, and that may be part of their work ethic as well. They're driven. They come to the interview with questions. They don't just sit there and listen to me talk to them. And then I go, you have any questions? Well, not at this time, but if I think about it, I'll get back in touch with you. That's not a candidate for me. The one that is really there is the one that's driven and says, I really enjoy this. This sounds like something that I'd be highly interested in. And by the way, I do have 4 questions right here, and I'd like to see if you could clarify those. So that's kind of the environment I've had to work in, because at the time I needed additional help. All the certified appraisers were taken up, and they said, we got more work and we can say grace over. So we're not interested in a vacant position that you may have or a job opportunity you may have. So I had to go all the way back down to the university level and harvest the talent there.
Thank you. We have an aspiring appraiser from Willis, Texas, who wants to know how to find an appraiser looking for a trainee, also wants to know how many hours it takes to become a licensed appraiser. We do have a link for that, and we'll put that in the chat. But if either of you supervisors can take that on, how to find an appraiser looking for a trainee.
So sure, the best way that I found my trainees, they didn't necessarily find me, but I found them, was through the Texas Association of Texas Appraisers website. We have a running list of trainees looking for supervisors. So when we did want to hire our trainees, that's the list that we went to, and we pulled a bunch of people that were in our area and brought them all in for interviews. And that's how we proceeded. And to build on what Mark said, you know, a lot of times we get the, oh, appraising sounds cool. And Melissa Bond said it perfectly at our trainee event for the National Association. She said it's a career, not a hobby. And I don't need somebody looking for a hobby because it's going to be a lot of work for just a hobby. So just to make sure that you guys work together well. If you really want to look, you can always go on the Association of Texas Appraisers website. You can start emailing different people. If you're a trainee, there's a list of people who are certified appraisers and certified general, and you can go ahead and send them emails through that website and contact them and see if they're taking anybody on.
Stephanie, you may have answered the next question. An appraiser from Yuma, Arizona wants to know, how can appraisers let trainees, the flip side of this, how can appraisers let trainees know that they are willing to supervise? Director Tran might correct me on this, but we do want to clarify that appraisers outside of Texas cannot supervise Texas trainees unless they are licensed in Texas. So can appraisers go to ATA, like you were saying, Stephanie, and sign up, express interest that they want to take someone on?
You'd have to be a member, and then you can go through whatever steps you need to do. So you have to be a member to be able to be a part of the ATA and on that website.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question is, yes, Mark.
May I also interject as well? I've been to the ATA meetings and they're real good. But there's other there, you know, if someone is looking for a sponsor, and I don't know of anyone just right in that corner of the court that they're looking at, I encourage them to look at all. There's a lot of professional appraisal organizations, and so that is really a good harvesting ground to find a sponsor. And I know if you're out in far west Texas, then there's a geographic challenge. But if you do express a high degree of interest, somehow or another, it will help out to be able to get into that. I know I belong to the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers, and the Texas chapter has their own website. And from time to time, the chapter secretary of that will say, hey, there's a trainee looking for an opportunity to have a sponsor in such and such area. And she'll throw that out there, and then the members of the organization can respond to that. So yes, I think that's a real good. There's several professional organizations, and so that would be a good first move for someone like that.
Thank you. The next question, an appraiser from Austin says, as a supervisor, how do you handle post-submission requests for corrections, reconsiderations of value, etc.?
Well, I think it's important to involve the trainee in that process, right? That's a perfect training opportunity. Typically, the way I handled it is if a trainee worked on the file with me, they would take the correction request and start the process of replying to it, and then they'd bring it to me and I would sign off on it, or I'd add some additional information.
Thank you. This one is for both Olivo and Stephanie. You've both mentioned that trainees have helped you run an efficient, profitable appraisal office. What are some takeaways from your experience that can help other supervisors?
You want to go first, Olivo?
No, go ahead, Steph.
Okay. How do we, the takeaways? Well, number one, as we talked about before, make sure that you guys are on the same page. Communication is a really, really big part of it, especially if you guys are not in the same actual office. We required our trainees to be in the office at least a few days a week, because that's when they learned a lot, whether it was a phone call or an email or anything else that happened while we were working on a report, to hear the thoughts and out loud of how we were developing it and why we were doing what we were doing, or responding to a phone call about a question. That was a big deal for how we learned how to go ahead and do our reports. So being able to do that and make sure that you're communicating is key. That way you can be on the same page. And once you're on the same page, then you can make gains in production. So once you guys are in the same routine, knowing how to do this, what your schedule is going to be like, what the best way is for each of your schedules to handle things, then you know what's going to work best for that office. And once they start getting to go out in the field and can do more of the report writing on their own and less review on our end, then you are starting to kind of see some gains in the office where you can give them a little bit more work, take an extra order here and there that they can go and do and not have to worry about it being all your time on that report.
Thank you. Did you want to? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Stephanie said. I think I would add that for me, the biggest takeaway when I started bringing trainees on is that it was very important for me to create systems so that everything was basically automated, right? One of the things that I learned from an early business coach was he said you have to create a bus list. If you get hit by a bus, somebody can pick up that list and do your job, right? And so that really helped me fine tune my processes and my systems. And anything that didn't require the appraiser expertise, you could delegate to a trainee. And that's how you become more efficient in the office and become more profitable.
I agree to build on that. My partner, she made all of these lists for all of our trainees to refer back to. So any questions that they had, they could go and look at that before they had to interrupt our workflow. And they had that as a reference constantly so that if they had any questions, they could build off of that. And that really helped everything so that it wasn't a constant me explaining the same thing over and over, getting interrupted throughout the day and costing me time and money doing that. So the other thing I learned is when they could start going in the field, I started putting them in the field much sooner than I did before, for multiple reasons. Number one, the lenders started allowing it for them to go without us having to go with them. So that was really, really nice. Once that started getting pushed, it made it a lot easier for us to be able to have them go out on their own. And number two, that's when you could kind of tell if they were going to make it or break it as an appraiser. Once they started having to juggle being in the field and finishing the report in the office and handling calls and handling emails and all the things that come with being an appraiser, that's when they either make it or they break it. And so it's like, I want to learn that a lot faster than towards the end of the training.
And if I may add, and I'm coming from a little bit different perspective, but I do have a program area that has grown. But the nice thing about it is post trainee position. And what I'm saying there is the ability to grow the firm. I know there was a question about why would I want to train up my competition, but we decided to be inclusive. And so the first 3 trainees that I had that became state certified, of course, there's still some more passage of time before they are able to do this per TALCB guidelines. But one of them, she is my full-time quality control reviewer. The other 2 are now managers, which they are also supervisory appraisers now of a bank of the trainees that we have in the office now. And they are afforded more time than I could, even when I had 3-on-1, to be able to give the training and the guidance needed. And in fact, I admired the managers because they took it upon themselves. They created what they have quarterly check-ins. And not that they're not communicating with the trainees day in and day out on assignments, but then it's a 90-day sit down. Where are you with your education? Where are you with your experience credits? And also what they did was they devised a sheet of strengths and weaknesses. Where's your strengths? What did you do good this quarter? What was a weakness? How can we fix that and improve upon the other? So it's really worked into a very good mechanism for us to be able to take in some additional trainees and keep the organization growing, because I think if there's anything that anybody is not, they're kidding themselves if they're not looking at it, because TALCB used to issue out the report about the number of state certified appraisers and what age brackets that are they in. And just like anything else in any industry, we have an aging workforce right now. So now it's like, I also just kind of thought, well, now I need to train my replacement sometime. So that's kind of the global aspect of what we were envisioning, what we with the new folks and the new ideas and the fresh ideas. I would have never thought about a strengths and weaknesses sheet in a quarterly review, but fresh faces and ideas come into your program area, and it's really invigorating and refreshing.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Kevin Smith representing Fannie Mae. If you don't mind explaining Fannie Mae's role in this profession.
I'd be glad to. So Fannie Mae, we don't originate loans, but we do purchase mortgage loans from lenders that appraisers are doing work for. And most of those loans, we require to have an appraisal. Those appraisals and the underwriting that goes into that loan do have to meet Fannie Mae standards. So when you hear about me talk about the Fannie Mae selling guide, that is where those standards come from. The selling guide is online, easily searchable. It's a good resource for appraisers to understand what we're looking for in an appraisal.
Can you explain some misconceptions people have about using trainees?
Yeah, there's a number. There's a number. So we have folks that wrongly believe that Fannie Mae prohibits the use of trainees, that trainees can't inspect properties alone. They must understand when a trainee must sign the appraisal report. There's a misunderstanding of the level of detail that's needed on the professional assistance disclosures on the appraisal. And then I think there's also an issue that's been talked about a little bit here too, that a lot of folks are focused on the expense of bringing on a trainee, an assistant, and not really recognizing the potential benefits and the value a trainee will bring.
Could you dig into Fannie Mae's requirements for the use of trainees and in appraisal reports, please?
Sure. So the first thing is the report does have to be signed by a licensed or certified appraiser. But we do allow the use of trainees and other non-licensed persons as the state allows. The disclosure, if you're using a trainee, it needs to be clear and specific to the assignment. We do see a lot of very vague statements, and that's not helpful. It really needs to be specific to that assignment. And we do actually allow the trainee to complete the appraisal. So if the trainee is acting as the appraiser, we do require that they sign the left-hand side of the Fannie Mae Form 1004 appraisal form. So the supervisor still needs to sign the right-hand side, and they can indicate whether they inspected or didn't inspect. But if they're the ones that are conducting the appraisal and the primary appraiser, we expect them to sign as well. That being said, if they're doing less than that, the disclaimer or the disclosures in the appraisal report about what the trainee actually did is required.
Thank you. What does Fannie Mae data show for appraisal reports where the appraiser used a trainee?
Yeah, and I'm gonna quote an article that was in the Fannie Mae appraisal update from December 2021, and you can find that by doing a web search if you'd like to read more about it. But basically, we said our analysis indicates that supervisory appraisers are doing a good job of mentoring trainees, resulting in appraisal quality that is on par with the overall profession. All right, so what does that mean? Actually, in some categories, we're seeing that appraisals with trainees had stronger metrics than appraisals without. But overall, relatively equal, possibly a little bit better. Over time, that has not changed. So that article is from 2021, but we're continuing to see that trend. We do have a internal score, a CU risk score. You may have heard a lender talk about this before. The distribution between trainees and non-trainees, it's nearly identical. We do have some internal flags for quality and overvaluation. Those flags are nearly identical between the trainee population and the population without trainees. And then beyond just our automated flags, Fannie Mae does conduct post-purchase random reviews of the loans that are delivered to us from the lenders, and our defect and finding rates between those two populations of appraisals with trainees and without, it's nearly identical. So it may be that a second set of eyes is actually giving some additional credibility and additional quality to the appraisal process, but we certainly are not seeing an erosion or low quality when our trainees involved.
Now, are there any instances where Fannie Mae does not allow the use of trainees?
Right. So the simple answer is no, we don't have any restriction. But I'll get into that a little bit. Um, so we do require that they're under the supervision of a certified appraiser. So, and that appraiser does need to sign the appraisal, whether as the appraiser or as a supervisor. And then when the trainees producing work as an appraiser, the disclosures need to be on the appraisal detailing what they did.
Thank you. I think you've touched on this already, but as a last thought, Fannie Mae's best practices for the use of trainees.
Sure. So first suggestion would be to take the supervisory class. Very, very good information, and we'd strongly encourage that. Avoiding the vague professional disclosure statements. Allow the trainee to develop and take on more responsibility. We really do want them to get to the point where they're acting as the appraiser and signing on the appraisal report themselves. If the appraiser isn't inspecting, I'm going to throw this out there, they should not be signing the report that they inspected the property if they did not. So quite a bit of confusion in that area. And then also we want to recognize that trainees may add value in unexpected ways. They may be bringing skills to your appraisal organization through tech skills, maybe organizational skills, marketing, communication skills that your organization needs.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We want to pass the baton now to Nicole Morris, who's joining us to provide the trainee perspective as a new trainee yourself. We know people have a hard time finding supervisors. What are your tips for trainees to show their value to a prospective supervisor?
Well, thank you all for having me today. Well, Kevin teed me up pretty nicely with that transferable skills, because that is the first thing that I wrote down as one of the things that I brought to the conversations when I was first meeting people, was to show, to demonstrate my experience. So I share my resume. I have a deep background in management operations and things like that. So I show that value up front. And the next thing that I did was, from a financial conversation, I think Olivo mentioned that earlier. The contacts that I have, or my mentors and supervisors, are independent, so they can't necessarily take on the financial responsibility associated with bringing on a trainee. I made that known up front that wasn't something that I needed to have. It's more important for me to get the skill sets to get in the field. So some costs I'm covering myself, some things they're doing. And then the last one is sharing the resources. Again, transferable skills. I was able to bring some other support to my supervisors to really show up for myself, at least for the folks that I'm working with, as a partner as well as a trainee. And make sure that we all got mutual benefit, which I think is how we probably should be approaching all of our relationships anyway.
Thank you. What advice do you have for supervisors when taking on a trainee?
Olivo and Stephanie, they covered them both. I think they covered them all in their conversations. The same things that are important to them when they're assessing a supervisor are also critical from assessing a trainee. They're also critical from a trainee perspective. It is making sure that everybody aligns and that this fits, right? Let's have that expectation conversation. How is this going to work? How are we going to communicate? My primary supervisor and I, we're now finding our rhythm for when I'm going on an expectation, what I'm contributing to a report, what are my outside skills, like from a tech perspective or a marketing perspective. I can do outreach calls. I'm going to some networking events tomorrow. It's finding that rhythm, and that's as important to me as it is to them, because this is a long-term career pivot for me. So the same.
Thank you. And Nicole, you are an ADI scholar. Again, that stands for Appraiser Diversity Initiative. That brings us to Denise Jernigan, who's the director of ADI. Could you please just tell us what ADI is?
Sure, thank you. So ADI is a partnership between Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the Appraisal Institute, as well as the National Urban League. The overall objective is to bring new entrants into the profession, but also to help them to overcome any barriers such as education, training, experience. ADI do offer scholarships to help overcome those barriers. ADI has 4 components to it. We call them our 4 pillars. One is the scholarship. So we help fund scholarships, and that would be from trainee all the way up to licensure. So we're very excited about that. We have 3 scholarships. We have a trainee scholarship, then we have our licensed residential scholarship. And for those that want to go the untraditional path of gaining their experience, we also have a career scholarship as well. We have our advisors. Our advisors would be evaluation professionals who would help guide our scholars, such as Nicole, throughout their process and throughout their journey. They would be act as such as a mentor, right? Then we have our sponsors. Our sponsors help us in so many different ways. Of course, we have financial sponsors that help with scholarships, but we also have sponsors in kind, and they have been able to give us and benefit us in ways such as Appraiser software. They've hosted some of our workshops, or they provide us swag at different conference events. So we're very thankful for our sponsors. And then finally, we have our workshops. Our workshops are our outreach program. This is how we get the new entrants to come into the professions. And so if you attend a workshop, you will learn more about ADI, but you'll also learn more about the profession. We have panelists such as this to come out that have been in the profession. We have scholars, and we have scholars who have completed the program to talk about their journey. So aspiring appraisals will get an understanding of what to expect when they enter this field.
This next question might seem redundant, but why is it important to have diversity in this industry?
Yeah, so our panelists have answered a lot of that. I know Mark talked about this is an aging profession and how new people bring new perspective. So that we talk about ADI is getting new entrants into the field, but we want to bring in new people as the profession begins to age. It brings new perspective. So diversity would bring the new perspective and a fresh outlook. Also, just representation, right? So I will say that ADI is open to anyone, regardless of the demographic factors, but representation matters. And so we want to bring in those different ideas, those different perspectives that would help advance the profession.
And how does one become an ADI scholar, just like Nicole Morris on our panel list?
So the first thing you would need to do is attend an ADI workshop, which is a requirement in order to apply for the scholarship. So once you attend that workshop, and our workshops last about 2.5 hours, and you get a number of different perspectives from that. And that also includes how to apply for the scholarship program. Once that workshop is complete, we open up our scholarship applications for you to apply. And then once you're granted the scholarship, you're on your way.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. We hit most, if not everything that we wanted to cover. That leaves us about 5 minutes to search our Q&A box to get to questions we may have already gotten to and maybe want to elaborate on or repeat in case someone missed it. And let's see, it looks like we have David Zaccardi wants to know, does ADI have a public list of licensed trainees available for supervisors to connect?
Yes, actually, we can definitely get that information to you. I know that I have some of my staff on the call, and if you're looking for a trainee, I think that's the question, right? If you're looking for a trainee, we can definitely help. We actually have a map of where our trainees are that are ready for supervisors, and we can make that connection.
Perfect, thank you. Someone else says, please list with specificity 5 necessary skill sets an appraiser must bring to the table in order to attract a supervisor. Further, please indicate where to get the training in these skill sets. Thank you.
Is this open for anyone?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I could at least name a couple. Number 1, the willingness to learn, open to learning, flexibility, You do have to be flexible with your schedule, because I can tell you right now, no day goes as planned. You try, but if you're in the field, there's constantly something that's going to mess up your day, whether it's somebody can't find the key at a model home or there's a car accident on the way. Like, there's always something. So be able to be flexible. Then I would say time management, because we are a career that's based on completion. You don't get paid till you're complete, and you turn that report in. If you don't have the management skills to regulate yourself and make sure that you are completing stuff on time and in a timely manner, then you're going to be costing yourself and your company money. So you don't want to sacrifice the quality, but you still want to make sure that you're using your time wisely throughout the day. Communication skills are very important. You need to be able to communicate not only with your supervisor, but the agents, the builders, the clients, everybody involved in the transaction that you might run into. You have to be able to have that communication skill set and ready to go. One that kind of, is more like scholarly is mathematics. You got to have your mathematics skills. You got to be able to make those adjustments, do the math to figure them out, all of the even geometry, your sketch and stuff, things like that. So those are some skills right off the bat that I can name that I think are important. Where you can learn them, honestly, some of them are intrinsic, where you got to figure it out for yourself. Some are just through practice and repetition. The more you do things, the more you become polished and the more you sharpen those skills. So if you want to learn more about any of those topics, then, any Google search can give you some sort of class that'll show you how to help improve those skills. You can go to college, but they only get you so far. As they said, they're even reconsidering that whole degree requirement anyway. So it just kind of depends on that. But I think that a lot of the skills that you need are something that are not written down in a book.
Thanks, Stephanie.
And-
Before we
and if-
close out, oh yes, Mark.
And if I may add, and I stated this earlier, that I hired some my trainees came fresh out of college, and some of them had already taken real estate courses as part of their degree program. But one other element, and I know as a trainee, we've talked about risk and supervisors' risk and the trainees' risk, but this is something that really impressed me. But I had an applicant. I mentioned that I had done an informal visit with them, and then it was some time. A couple of months before we actually officially posted a position. But in between that period of time, this person that had like a parks degree, he didn't have anything that was remotely real estate related. When he sent his application in, he had already taken the 15-hour USPAP and passed the exam. He had already taken, I can't remember one of the others exams, but he was well on his way to the 75 hours to be able to send in application to the TALCB to come on board, get his trainee's license, and immediately go to work. There was no ramp up time to get them to that position. And so if you're a trainee and you want to impress a supervisor and you haven't taken any of those courses and you're really thinking that you're serious about being in the valuation profession, you'll get a leg up on other trainees if you've already passed some of those core 75 hours to become a trainee.
And I wanted to add to what Denise said. So ADI workshops that you have to attend to be able to become a scholar. The Association of Texas Appraisers is hosting ACTS conference in April in San Antonio with the conjunction with the National Association of Appraisers. And there's going to be an ADI workshop during that event. So keep your eyes and ears out for that, so that if something you're interested in the state of Texas, please attend.
Thank you for that. Absolutely.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone. I was off with my timing. We're at 1:51, but if there's a final thought you'd want appraisers, supervisors, or trainees to know, anyone can pick this up.
I will say that an email has been dropped in the chat about how to connect with trainees, so through ADI.
Yes, go check out that chat because Sierra's got some great information all up on there so that you can go back to any of the stuff we were talking about and look it up. Um, Final thoughts for me, if you're a trainee, just be open and willing to learn and make sure that you are communicating with your supervisor and bringing something to the table. Don't depend solely on your supervisor for learning. You're responsible for your own education. You've got to get in there and get going, and you're not going to learn everything out of the books and off the class. So the more you can get involved with the networking and doing things on your own, practice measuring a house, practice measuring your house, things like that, just to get used to your field work and things like that. Definitely get on top of that. And then as a supervisor, don't be afraid. Make sure that you guys have the same goals, and even if they don't stay afterwards, you will get some benefit throughout the process. It's not up front. We all know the learning curve is very steep, but it will eventually work out where at least you guys can learn from each other and grow together. And there are some definite advantages to having a trainee in your office. So don't let it scare you. I promise you can do it.
I would add that it's speaking to appraisers that are thinking about becoming supervisors. I would highly encourage you to consider it, seriously consider it. I would tell you that it takes a village. And for me, I've had a lot of mentors throughout my career that have encouraged me and have taught me things. And so it's important for you to be part of professional organizations or, speak to the folks that mentored you to give you some guidance. That's very important. And being a supervisor can be profitable. It can make the business much more profitable. But it's also the right thing to do because we have a responsibility for the future generation to be able to coach and encourage folks to get into this profession. Because if we don't, we're going to be in a situation again where we're going to have a shortage of appraisers, and Fannie and Freddie and all the other regulators will find other ways to get valuations, right? And so we want to be the first go-tos because we want to keep this profession alive.
I totally agree. It's hard to add any more than what's already been said, but you did touch on a very important point, and it's an oversimplification whether you're a supervisor or a trainee. But as you grow, we all grow, and I think that is critically important because if there's one thing that appraisers learn real quick is to read the marketplace, and if there's a shortage of us, then the marketplace will find ways to get the information they need. And so this is the best way to do it. I believe that true flesh and blood is better than any artificial intelligence out there. And this is what is vital to the safety and integrity of underwriting loans. And so we all play a crucial role in that underwriting process. And, again, I've heard the terms, that we're, that the real estate profession is here to make people's dreams come true, and we're part of that. So I encourage everyone to pick up trainees or be a supervisor, as has been said. Thank you for your time, and those that came in to inquire with this panel. It indicates to me that everyone here has a high level of interest in what we do, be it as regulators, participants, or appraisers. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mark. I do want to get to one last question. Nicole, this was your question actually, and maybe Mark or Stephanie or Olivo, one of you can handle this. Best practices for new appraisers for building the business. Nicole, you mentioned struggling the most with understanding all the kinds of valuation work that you can do and how to get in front of those people to let them know that you can do it.
Yeah, and if I could elaborate on it, it just is like, what kind of appraisers can I do? Like when I'm out here now, I'm like, okay, well, I can be a legal expert. I can be this, I can do that, and do that. And I'm that person. Like when I went to the first ADI meeting, I flew from Chicago to Phoenix to go to that meeting because I didn't want to wait for the next one. So I will go after it. I just don't know where to go. So
I think the guidance there would be just find your niche, something that you enjoy doing. like I personally love working with attorneys. So I've kind of found a little niche there. The vast majority of our work is mortgage work, right? Because we gotta pay the bills. But just find the things that you're interested in. There's a lot of really cool niches in the appraisal profession that if you become an expert at it, you're the go-to person, and you can make a lot of money at it.
I totally concur with that. I think it is beneficial for you to get as much exposure to all the types of valuations and those environments that they are involved in. Personally, for me, and I know some people don't care for it, but anything that involves testimony work, whether it's expert witness in court or if it's in front of the legislature, whatever it may be, that's my niche. And so that's what interests me. That is not the only thing that interests me. I mean, everybody has subsets underneath that of things that they're willing to do. But with time and experience, you'll find what your first love is.